Welcome to Get Real Estate. I'm your host, Monica Thomas, and today we're going to be interviewing Kelly Kline. He is One Trust Home Loans, and I have a bunch of questions for you. Everyone's kind of holding their breath and wondering, are rates going to keep going up? What should I do? Should I buy now? Should I try a different investment or a different, ARM, adjustable rate mortgage? Do you have any ideas on what we should do, Kelly?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Monica, thanks for having me on your show here today.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with your audience and hopefully bring a little education to them as well. I've been in the mortgage business now for 22 years. And seen quite a few different cycles through that period of time. And a couple of things that are happening in the market right now that are leading people to be, maybe a little uneasy,
right,
is that rates have gone up quite a bit here since the beginning of 2022. Now, what I don't think the average consumer understands really is, what does the Federal Reserve do and how does that impact the consumer when they talk about raising rates? And so we've been hearing since January that the Fed is going to raise the rates, and they're probably going to raise rates somewhere between 2.5% to 3% over the entire year. So when the mortgage-backed securities markets and the secondary markets hears this information, they take that into consideration right away. And we don't wait, or they don't wait for the Fed to raise the rates every single time. So the interest rates jumped up really quickly, basically as a result of hearing what the Fed's plan was for the year. So now every time the Federal Reserve meets each month and says, yeah, we're going to go ahead and raise rates 0.5% this month, the markets kind of predicted that. The markets kind of anticipated that. So there's not really too much turbulence, right? Turbulence happens when you find something that's not reliable information and it throws everybody kind of out of whack. So as long as the Federal Reserve continues to raise rates to the tune of 1/4 to 0.5% each time they do that raise, I don't actually see the mortgage rates adjusting in reciprocation to those adjustments. The market's really kind of already baked that in, and that's why we're seeing interest rates up into the 5.5% and almost 6% range right now.
And so would you recommend an adjustable rate mortgage? Do you think it would be possibly worth to play that game, or do you think that people are better off just sticking with a fixed rate mortgage?
Very good question. And, historically, adjustable rate mortgages are really made for and good for fairly savvy investors, right? People who have a very short-term plan with a property, maybe a flipper, maybe somebody who has a very large asset base and they leverage their money in a variety of different investment vehicles.
Or if you're doing a condo conversion.
Yeah, right. So things along those lines. But for your average consumer, an adjustable rate mortgage is probably not the right tool for long-term successful home ownership. And a lot of times when you go into an adjustable rate loan, you do so because there's a difference in rate somewhere to the tune of 0.5% or greater in rate between a fixed rate and an adjustable rate. Well, right now, there really isn't that big of a margin gap between an adjustable and a fixed rate. So right now, while there's a lot of chit chat going on out there about getting an adjustable rate, if you really shop the rates around, they're not that different right now. So in my professional opinion,
recording in progress,
for the average consumer, I wouldn't really advise going into an adjustable rate environment at this moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to invite our my manager, Rick Turley, into the conversation. He's the Bay Area manager, the VP for Engel and Volkers. We have a couple listener questions, so both of you can quip in if you have some thoughts. I've got some clients looking to buy right now. They are basically with their parents, thinking about, what sorts of agreements, what sort of discussions do they want to have in advance with their parents as they are thinking of, getting a loan together and also buying a home together? What are some of the questions that they might ask themselves and each other? Kelly?
Yeah, that's I'm seeing a lot of that, and I have been seeing a lot of that for the last 2 years. I think that there's a lot of generational wealth that's changing hands in the current times that we're in, with the baby boomer generation of 65 and overs having lost family members, having had parents with lots of real estate. That real estate's changed hands or sold, and there's been a lot of money kind of transitioning between generations. And so now a lot of the millennials and the Gen Xers are starting to reap some of the rewards of those families' inherited assets. And the best place to park it has been in real estate historically, and especially over the last 4 or 5 years as we've seen the market continue to drive upward. So having that conversation with mom and dad or grandma and granddad about, borrowing money or getting a gift of some funds to allow them to go purchase their own real estate is definitely something we're seeing often and regularly, and is something that is very relevant and very manageable within the mortgage marketplace today.
Rick, do you see when people are buying houses at a family, is there some kind of conversation that you can help them either make peace or make good agreements in advance?
Right, absolutely. That's a great question, Monica. And I believe no matter how tight the family is and how much in agreement they are going forward with the purchase, I think it's wise to really set out what the rules would be within the family. This has nothing to do with necessarily the title or even the loan. Once you've done all of the proper documentation and the lender's note and title and escrow are in agreement, there still could be agreements made between the parties if let's say something happens to the parents, want their down payment back and the kids don't want to sell. I mean, it would be good to kind of iron out some of those in some sort of even an informal agreement. That's just kind of at the consumer level, just having that discussion and documenting it, not a legal binding contract between the family members, but just actually kind of spelling it out what the intentions are. Kelly would know best about the what needs to go, what documentation is needed for all the participants if there's a loan involved. Title and escrow will have their requirements on how title is held. But then I would also caution, we see this in the transaction world. We see this happen sometimes midway through escrow, where maybe the borrowers aren't as strong as they had hoped to be, and the family has to come in with some down payment money. And if the parents are then, let's say it's a parent situation, if the parents are going to go on title, word of caution, we have to go through and have the parents sign all of the disclosures and all of the transaction documents that the kids signed, that the original children borrower signed. So, it just takes a little extra work, but that can be done. It's really a documentation world these days. The more digital we are and the faster things are going, we can't shortcut a lot of the steps that need to be taken to get proper documentation.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about self-employed borrowers right now. Like, what are some of the things, Kelly, if you have a client who's, is self-employed and they want to think about owning a house in the next couple of years, what are the things that they need to think about in order to qualify for a loan in the future? What are some of the tricks or the tips that they might think about? Like, okay, how do I want to structure my taxes and my deductions, and how do I buy a house in the Bay Area?
Awesome question. And yeah, it's definitely a strategy session with self-employed clients. A couple of the big things that I like to educate my clients on is that there's two wars you fight in this world from a finance perspective. A, Uncle Sam, and B, the banking world. And usually you don't win both of those fights unless you play completely above board and fair, right? Well,
Right.
what does that mean? That means
Transparently.
if you play above board and fair, you pay your fair share of taxes. And when you pay your fair share of taxes, the bank will then approve you based on how much income you report. The average self-employed individual doesn't usually pay their fair share of taxes because they have so many opportunities to write off expenditures against their business. So their gross profit versus their net profit has such a variance. And a lot of times that variance is what hurts them from getting qualified for a home loan. So a couple of things that I try to educate my clients to do if I know I have some runway to work with on their planning to buying a home is have them set up business bank accounts, use those business bank accounts to pay for as many of their business's expenses as they can, especially car payments and credit card bills. And by doing that, you can omit those personal debts off of the credit report if you can prove that the business has been paying for the expense on behalf of the consumer. So that's a good strategy. Another good strategy is an item on your taxes that's called depreciation. And if you take a depreciation expense deduction off of your income, it means you pay less in taxes. But in the mortgage world, depreciation is merely a paper write-off. So you can depreciate the assets that your business has, like your phone and your computer and your vehicle and your office equipment and whatever other expenses or things that you might have had to buy to run your business. You can depreciate those, reduce your net income, but not have your net income affected for the purposes of qualifying for a home loan. So if you get a little bit creative and you get a little bit of coaching in advance, then the loan coach gets you into a home loan.
Now I want to ask you some questions about people buying a property with multiple owners, and they're thinking about going into a duplex, and they kind of want to think about, like, what do I need to think about with an income generating property?
So that can get a little bit tricky, even more so than the parent-child acquisition of real estate, right? Because you're talking about just uninterested parties who want to partner up and buy real estate together. A lot of times when I see this happen, I see these folks, they pool some money together. Maybe one person buys a property in their name, but then they put the title to the property in this little LLC that the group of people put together. And then you kind of have limited exposure to the individuals behind the LLC. And maybe if one person has strong credit, a strong buyer profile, they're the one who goes on the loan. Now, if that's not necessarily the case, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. We can do loans for multiple borrowers on the same property. But one thing that you will encounter that could be somewhat challenging and problematic is trying to say that this property is going to be owner occupied and that I'm going to live in unit A and my partner in crime is going to live in unit B and we're both going to buy this home together, but I already own a home. So there's not really a way that you can make sense out of it to be saying that I already own my own home and I'm going to go buy this duplex and I'm going to live in a half of a duplex with my buddy who's going to live in the other half of it. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge because it just doesn't necessarily on paper make sense.
Hey, Kelly, I've got a question. Sorry to interrupt, but so if let's say that two people want to get together on a duplex and neither of them own a home yet, so they're intending to occupy each half on their own, and I'll take this out of San Francisco because with our rent control rules, that's a whole nother conversation with
Got it.
multi-unit buildings. But if it's, say, in a non-rent controlled area, would they then qualify together for an owner occupied loan
Yes.
even though they're buying the building jointly?
Yes. In that case, yes. If neither occupant owns real estate currently and they're going to come together to buy a multi-unit together for their personal residences, that would be lending eligible.
Oh, good.
And so you can investigate and find out the answer about like whether or not people are owner occupying and or if they need a commercial loan and what sorts of documentation they need in terms of like I'm imagining rent rolls and that sort of thing so that you can offer what I'm imagining is a completely different kind of loan because I know that the documentation needed, I mean, for an owner occupied single family or even a duplex, like those are fairly easy loans to get and
Yes.
to create as a lender. I'm imagining that if it's not owner occupied, a lot more information is needed. Do you even do those loans?
We do. And to slightly correct your train of thought on that,
Thank you. Please do.
if you buy a property up to 4 units, that still constitutes as residential homes. So in that case, it's not really that much different. But the more doors you get into that beyond 2, yeah, you start to, the question begins to be asked, is this really going to be an owner occupied residence? And how does it make sense? Are there notices to vacate issued to the occupants of the residence? You have to be able to take possession of the property within 60 days to be your owner occupied home. So there's a couple of little caveats that need to make sure that you clear the pathway to occupancy for it to be able to be done as a primary residence that you plan to reside in.
And then when I read that question too, Monica, I was thinking that maybe the listener wanted to know about multiple people going in together to buy a multi-unit building. And if that were the case, then
Yeah, that's
of course
also
the
true.
rent roll would be really important as to the lenders will only allow a certain percentage of the current rent as a way to help pay off the debt. So you're not getting 100% of the rent to help qualify. And then, of course, the people that are the buyers would have to qualify on their own right.
Yes.
Correct, Kelly?
Yeah, exactly. So, when you get into multi-units more extensively than a 2-unit, you start bringing in fair market rent rolls. You start bringing in lease agreements. You start figuring out the debt servicing capacity of that property. How much money would that property generate in rent if I, the buyer, had no money at all? If I lost my job, I couldn't afford to cover my mortgage. Could that property actually pay for itself and service the debt on the loan that's been given to the buyer of that property? And that's where debt servicing ratio loans come into the equation. And we can write those loans where a borrower maybe doesn't have the ability to qualify for the loan, but the property makes enough revenue that revenue is sufficient enough to carry that debt plus covering some reserve.
And I've always said just on average, that type of loan might be a 30 to 35% down requirement as compared to a more typical 20%.
You got it. Yeah, typically you're going to see that product is going to be 30% down at least. However, in 2 examples, FHA will do loans to a primary borrower who's buying a multi-unit with only 3.5 to 5% down. And a VA loan is also eligible for a military individual, active or non-active, who has eligibility with their VA certificate to buy up to 4 units as an owner-occupied home if they don't currently own a residence. So you can find a fairly reasonable VA or FHA buyer wants to buy multi-units, that's doable.
Yeah, and then with
Great.
a VA, they have zero down. It's an amazing program.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Kelly. This has
Absolutely.
been Kelly Kline, One Trust Home Loans. Thank you so much for taking time away from the ball game today for us. Really appreciate you being on Get Real Estate with Monica Thomas and my guest, Rick Turley. He is the VP for Engel and Volkers, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Engel and Volkers, the company. I'm so grateful that I've been here for so many years. I've just been so I've been in real estate for 8 years, but I've been at EV in the Castro office as long as the Castro office has been in existence, and it's such a cozy and wonderful place. How have you found the different? I mean, I know that you've now just opened the Union Street office.
Right.
That's a beautiful office, and our recent event with the renovation program, that's really neat, where you don't have to pay for your renovations as a seller. That's pretty neat.
Until the closing. I
Right.
should add. Hey, should we say goodbye to Kelly so he can get up to his son's
Oh,
baseball
we
game?
we did.
Okay.
Okay.
You're the best. Thanks for
Good.
coming on the show.
Thanks, Kelly. Good
Thanks
luck
for
with your
having me,
son's
Rick.
game.
Pleasure talking to you guys and to your audience. If I can help in any way, just check me out on the web at www.loancoachkelly.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that,
Thanks,
Kelly.
Kelly.
I really
Yes.
appreciate
Have
it.
fun at the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Have a great
enjoy.
day.
So,
Thank you.
Monica, first of all, like we at England Volkers are so happy that you're one of the founding members of the Castro shop. I mean, gosh,
I'm number 3.
number 3.
Yeah,
in that
the
location.
third agent. Yeah.
So we're excited. Just a really quick rundown. Our company is now, I think, 42, maybe 43 years old, and founded in Hamburg, Germany. There are 130 some odd. 1,030 some odd shops around the globe, many throughout Europe. And they're
I've really enjoyed visiting all of the Engel Volkers shops around the world. I've been to Budapest and Greece and the Champs-Élysées and Paris. I mean, it is fun to add that to your itinerary
and
and
see
travel.
all the places.
Yeah,
so-
exactly. They're really there.
Yep, we're truly a globally connected brokerage, and we're really so proud of our kind of small and boutique feel, and really a high touch of personal assistance and white glove service to our clients. So we're really lucky to have you, Monica.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I mean, of course, I love all the values, and every home is a mansion, and, living in Oakland and still being able to sell a bunch of houses. And so it really has been my pleasure. But yeah, I kind of want to talk about all the different things that we do around the Bay Area, and especially, in wine country. Do you ever go up there? I mean, I know that we went there for the recent event.
Oh, no, I was just there yesterday. We have
I felt like you
5 shops
get around up
in
there.
Marin and 3 in Sonoma, 2 in Napa.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell if I may, one quick little interesting story about our
I would
shops
love
up
it.
there. When the pandemic hit in March 2020, it seemed like the great escape out of San Francisco. Many people drove to Marin and Sonoma and Napa to look for a house with a backyard and a house with a patio, all the things that they might have
They
been.
wanted more space.
Yes, they wanted more space, and they wanted to have some outdoor space. So what we've ended up realizing is they were looking at property in March and April and May during the pandemic when no one was going to work, so the
And
freeways
also,
were empty.
Yeah, no one was actually buying property, but they were looking.
Well, no, quite to the contrary.
Really?
Marin and Sonoma
Some
and
closed
Napa
deals, huh?
got a huge bounce in their
Wow.
activity. So people were actually going up and shopping and purchasing. But now, fast forward almost a year and a half later, Many people are back to work, and all of a sudden, that quick 20-minute drive from, let's say, Larkspur to downtown San Francisco is now
it's
back
not
to an hour, 20 minutes.
It's not a quick drive anymore.
Right. So we're actually seeing some people that have had a home there for a year and a half actually looking at
Really?
moving back into the city.
Oh, wow.
So just an interesting side note on that. But the counties to the north, to the east, and even San Mateo to the south,
Yeah.
all got some movement from people leaving the city.
That's actually my experience too, because when the pandemic hit, I got a bunch of friends who were like, I need to leave my rent-controlled apartment in the city that I've lived in for 20 years, and I have to get a single family in Oakland. And I was so busy that all I could do is eat, sleep, and sell houses. So, I mean, it was good, but it was also like, very intense. And, the market was really intense with interest rates so low. But then the competition among buyers was pretty fierce.
Exactly. We had the fear of missing out going on. We had people just, doing 15, 20, 25% over the asking price and still losing.
Yeah, especially in Berkeley.
Oh.
It was bananas in Berkeley.
To some degree, it still is. Just I think your listeners should know that it's, if there's going to be any adjustment at all, my opinion is that within San Francisco and close in to San Francisco, that the prices may flatten. We don't really expect the prices to drop, but the rate of appreciation could slow down. And if it does, it would create a more fair market, because it has been so severely a seller's market only that we're looking forward to the possibility of it being a fair market for a while. And that means not every home will sell in the first 7 days. And it means that more buyers may get an offer accepted without doing too many cartwheels.
Right. And releasing all those contingencies, because that's scary.
We've got a lot of topics for another
I know.
talk.
We have a lot to talk about.
That's a good one about contingencies.
And I also want to talk about deals. Like, how could you find a deal? Like, if you really wanted to find something that was a deal, can you think of any ways? I've got some thoughts.
Okay, I'd love to hear yours.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so my client wanted a deal, and so he actually set his Real Scout preferences so that he only saw properties that had been on the market more than 30 days. And that was my coaching, because I was like, well, if you don't want to compete with everyone, just see what's been on the market for a while. And he found this house that was in terrible shape. It had been on the market for a really long time, and it was in this great area, but it was also next to a freeway. And so because he was just going to owner occupy for a short time, it ended up being the perfect investment for him. It was a 2-bedroom, and also a duplex. So he was owner occupying one side, and then he already had some tenants in the other side. And so he had the work done. It ended up working out great. And now he's now renting in Chinatown.
That's awesome. It's a
Having gotten through the pandemic and now has some investment property that he gets to own.
Yeah. That's great. That's a great idea. And, your listeners may know there's the Real Scout program that we can put them on at Engel and Volkers is an alert that they see properties almost as quickly as we see them through the MLS, but then setting that control to say, don't show me every new listing that comes up that's going to go bonkers, but let's only look at properties that are much older. It's great
and
idea.
you can really dial in like what you really are interested in. So if you want properties by the ball field, or if you want being next to Trader Joe's, or if you don't want to be near a school, you can dial exactly your preferences in.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a really neat tool.
And another way that people have found super deals in the past historically has been looking at foreclosures and looking at pre-foreclosures. And homes that have a financial distress element to them. And we're not seeing as many of those because the market is so much more flush with equity. In 2008, when things crashed and Bear Stearns and all the others followed, that was due to the funny loans that were going on that were 100%, people who couldn't qualify. So there was a lot of what we called short sales as well as outright foreclosures for the next 8 to 10 years. Now we have more of a history of people putting closer to maybe on average 15% down. 20% down is kind of the norm now, but there are some programs with 10%. So with that much skin in the game, people aren't going to quit making payments unless they absolutely cannot make payments. So the foreclosure market and pre-foreclosure market is a lot more rare. But if you got with a great agent, such as yourself, and you got a list of no, I don't sell. I'm just here to support you.
Really?
Yep.
You don't
You
sell
didn't
houses?
know that about me.
Oh, no, I did not.
I'm just there to support you.
Oh, that's why you're here.
That's
Aw.
right. So the ability to watch a home that's where there's records when they're late on payments and notices of an impending default, getting on those lists and seeing those homes, you could watch one, and perhaps like in the old way, you pick it up on the courthouse steps right at foreclosure. It is happening with savvy investors who follow that.
Yeah, it's quite a market, and at the last minute, sometimes people will end up not foreclosing, and so they get the pictures taken, and then it's not a deal, and in many ways, that's a time to be like, oh, well, good for you, congratulations, even though you're not going to get access to that one anymore. It's
I think
to celebrate.
One of the worst things to see is someone lose their home.
Oh, it's the worst.
It's,
Yeah.
You don't want to prey on that situation. But however, if a home is definitely abandoned and going to go to foreclosure, then why not be the one that's going to pick it up?
Yeah, and it is, the highest and best use of a property. I think that's one of the things that I've been thinking about with, thinking about like, should I, buy this property in Castro Valley? And what am I going to do with it? What would be the highest and best use for this property? Should I, rent out some rooms? Should I rent out the whole thing? Like what are my different choices? And of course, with that renovation program, the options are really endless because, we could add another bedroom or something like that. And then it's really time to think about like, what is, the best thing to do with your real estate?
It seems to me that once you've amassed the what you believe to be the down payment needed, and again, if it's non-owner occupied, it's going to be more stringent. It's likely going to be a little more down payment, and certainly the interest rate won't be quite as favorable. So the easiest answer is buy it and live in it. But if
I would just want to rent a room, rent out rooms. So I'm living still in it, but then I'm renting out rooms because Castro Valley is a really big, expensive. There are a lot of Teslas in the neighborhood. So I'm hoping that I can get someone to rent a room that, needs a reasonably affordable place to stay.
I would think that's entirely possible.
Because there's serious money in Castro Valley.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Get Real Estate.
I'm happy to be here, and I love your program, love the format, and I'd love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, likewise. We should have more people come on, especially from, we could have Real Scout and...
Right.
I really enjoyed her tips and tricks for how to get more out of Real Scout, both as the client, there are some interesting things that people can get more out of their searches. So they really actually dial in to what they are, because a lot of times with, emails that we're getting so many emails every day and we can't even look or read all of the emails that we get because we sign up for like
Right.
all these things. And so you really have to like manage your choices and say yes to the information that you really want, because otherwise we're just in this overload of, too much information, too much data.
Right. Right.
So we really have to like dial in, what really do I want? What really is going to support my family, and how are we, I think also as a homeowner, we really do want this both to be a pleasurable, beautiful, relaxing place, but then also to be a good investment.
Right. Right. And I think it's entirely possible to have both if that's your goal.
Absolutely.
Another topic we could go deeper on is the free model program, and especially if among your listeners there are people who maybe have had a house in the family for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe children have inherited the house and it's been rented out, and now they want to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
The free model program is where the licensed general contractor will take whatever improvements you, and often it's the owner and the realtor, come together to decide what improvements should be done, and they advance every bit of the work. They pay all the subs. It's under a general contractor's agreement with insurance and proper licensing, and then they pay the entire amount at close of escrow, so no upfront costs.
Yeah, it's such a neat program because you don't actually have to worry about it or hire the subcontractors. And, also as a realtor, I've done houses where, I took so many loads of stuff to the Goodwill, and I found painters and got quotes, and all of it was so much work. But it's so luxurious having someone else do it. And I think the free model program is it's such a neat idea.
Yeah, we're really excited about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Great. Thank you, Monica.
Get Real Estate. And you can find more at getrealestate.us right here at the Edge Studios. And thanks so much for listening.